Welcome. This is the first video in a series about working with Pocketbase as your backend with Angular. If you've never heard of Pocketbase and you want to know more, I'll link a video in the cards and in the description for a video I did previously that covers the basic information about Pocketbase, how to set it up, how to use the admin UI. You'll definitely want to check that out first. Let's go. As you can see, I already have Pocketbase downloaded, so I'm going to create a folder inside of my empty folder called Pocketbase, and then just drag the Pocketbase exe into that folder. Next, I'll create a terminal, and I want to cd into the Pocketbase folder, and then I want to type in /Pocketbase space serve. That will launch Pocketbase so that we can access the REST API and the admin UI. I want to create a test user so that we can log in and out of the application. And I'll just use test@test.com. And I always use the same password for these local instances. Next, I want to create a new user in my users collection. And I'm just going to use the same exact email and password for the user. Be sure to turn on verified and give it a name. Cool. Now back over in code, you can see that Pocketbase creates a folder structure inside of that Pocketbase folder that stores your data. Anytime that you want to just reset the Pocketbase instance, you can delete that folder and start from scratch. We need another new terminal to work with Angular. So ng new robo task, and we don't want tests, and we want our style sheets to be inline, and we want routing. We want to use CSS, and we don't need server-side rendering. I'm going to fast forward the video, but you should pause and just let the ng new do its course. Okay, cool. So our folder structure looks good. We need to cd into RoboTask, and then I'll clear the screen so that we can get going. The first thing that we're going to do is we need to install Pocketbase. So that's npm install /save and Pocketbase. This one will be much quicker than Angular. Next, we want to do npm install /save Bootstrap. You're welcome to use Tailwind, but I'm more familiar with Bootstrap, so that's what I'll use. All right, so let's go into the source app folder. We want to generate a new component in the pages folder called tasks. I want to make sure my folder structure is correct. Okay. We want to generate a second component in the pages folder named login. Okay. Next, we want to clear out the app component. The only thing that we want is the router outlet. Okay, close this. Next, we want to generate a new interface, and we want to stick that in the interfaces folder and name it user model. We also want to generate a new service, and we want to stick that in the shared /services folder and name it auth service. Then we can cd one up and clear the screen. Next, I want to generate the environments. And I think that's where we'll get started at. And in the environment file, we want to create a base URL variable and set that value to 127.0.0.1:8090. That's where we will be hitting the API at, and we need this in both environment files. So we'll close those and then move one level up and start with the auth service. We need to import Pocketbase from Pocketbase. Notice there's no curly braces. We also need to import the user model, and we need to import environment. We also need to import a behavior subject from RxJS. The first thing we want to do is set up a private user subject as a behavior subject for user model or null. And we want to set that to a new behavior subject, user model or null. And the initial value will in fact be null. Next, we'll want an observable user $ equals this.userSubject.asObservable. We won't use these in this video, but we will use them later. Next, we need the login method. So this will be a sync, and it's going to accept an email address argument string and a password argument string. And that's going to return a promise Boolean. Next, we need to create an instance of the Pocketbase library, and we'll pass in the environment.base URL variable. And here's your friendly reminder to like and subscribe. We post new videos often for software developers, software engineers, and software architects. Thanks. Next, and this will just be for observation, we want const auth data equals await Pocketbase or pb.collection users.auth. And here you can see some of the options that it has out of the box. And we'll just pass in the email address and the password. Now at this point, we can always just check Pocketbase to see if we are authenticated. And we will set the user subject next to be values from Pocketbase. So the isValid equals pb.authstore.isValid. The isValid value can be checked to see if you are in fact logged in. Next, we'll set the auth model to pb.authstore.model. And finally, we'll set the token to pb.authstore.token. And we will return pb.authstore.isValid. So next, I guess we should populate the user model. First, we need an isValid property as a Boolean, the auth model property as auth model or null, and a token property as string. Next, we want to set up the routes so that we can get to where we need to go. Our default route with a path of empty string will link to the login component, and we want to set the path match to that as full. And we also want a route set up for tasks, and that component will be the task component. We can close that. Next, inside of the login component, we can start filling out the details here. We need to import common module, forms module. We want to import the tasks component so that we can redirect to it. Inside of our class, we will import the auth service as auth service equals inject auth service. We also want to set router to inject. Then we need to set properties for the email address string equals empty string, password string equals empty string, and a display error message property as a Boolean equals false. Next, we need our login method. And this method we'll call the authService.login, and we'll just pass in the email address and password. In our then, we're expecting a Boolean value to be returned from that login method. If the return result is true, we'll use the router to navigate by URL to the tasks page. If that value is false, we will display that error message by toggling this value to true. I'm not too worried about catching an error right now. We may come back to that later. Inside of the login component's display HTML, I'm just going to paste in some code. This is pretty basic Bootstrap code. I'm not going to go into a great deal of depth here. Just know that we've got two inputs, one for email address, one for password. They've both got models, ng models set to those properties on the component. Our login button is going to be disabled unless they fill out the email address and password. And when they click it, it will go call the login method. And if that fails, here's the display error message that will be displayed to the user. All right, so we'll CD one level up, and then we're going to do an ng build just to make sure everything is good. Okay, it looks good. And we're ready. Let's do ng serve and check our results. So control click on that. I forgot to save. So let's do that. And Bootstrap has to be added to angular.json. So let's close the page. Go back to angular.json and add Bootstrap as one of the CSS options. That's in node modules /bootstrap/dist/css/bootstrap.css. Okay, so save. So we'll clear the screen. Let's try again. ng build, make sure everything looks good. Cool. Now we're ready with ng serve. And again, we'll control click on localhost. That looks better. And type in our email address and password that we entered before. Before clicking the login button though, hit F12 to open up the developer tools, and let's go into the auth service and set a couple of breakpoints here so that we can walk along with the code as it executes. So here, our base URL is coming through, looks good. And step over. So now if we examine auth data, you can see that there is a token, so it was successful. And the record will give us an overview of what's there. You can see our user ID, the name, the email address, the verified is true. That's very important. So we have been authenticated and we are redirected to tasks. Excellent. That's it. We're done. That's login. Very, very simple after the project setup. I'll draw it to a close here. I'll put a card up on the video again for the Pocketbase overview in case you need it. And in the next video, we'll go over the registration process. Until next time, keep coding.